I don't know how the video got so big compared to the screen. Let's see what we can do here. I think that's better, slightly. Thursday. Organizational structures continues. As we can see from our syllabus, it says here week 11. We're kind of in week 11. Levels of management. So last video I gave us some background on the levels of management. We're in chapter 8 in our book, by the way. The levels of management to highlight are usually called top, middle, and maybe frontline or operational daily management. So the level of production. So at that level, at each level, different functions of management are used more than others. For example, a lot of planning takes place at the top level. And there's a lot of planning in the middle level in terms of how to use resources. So the planning at the top level is slightly different. It's got more of a vision of the company and the long-term future. And then the middle management has to do with the more middle-term and short-term goals. And the front line has to do with daily production and meeting targets, very short-term goals. So the planning really occurs in the top level and the middle level. Leading is happening from the top of the organization. We can feel the culture of the organization from the top, and whether or not it's supportive, inspirational, visionary, makes the staff want to work harder, believe in the company. And the kind of leading that goes on in the daily operation on the front line is more about meeting the short-term targets, making sure that workers are having their daily, their daily needs are met. You can kind of see those levels of management in a sports team, right? You have these assistant coaches who are there to take care of the daily issues, and doctors who are there to take care of the daily issues, and then you have the managers there to inspire the whole team. That's leading. O stands for organization. This is POLC, the POLC management functions. That has to do with coordinating, organization and coordinating all the different resources of the business in order to make them prepare that for meeting the goals. Also includes R&D. So if you have Steve Jobs, who's head of Apple, and he says he wants to make a phone that'll be like it'll fly to you, and like a drone when you put your hand up in the air, like a bird that you own, that comes to you, a pet bird that comes to you whenever you put your finger out. Then the research team is set to try to figure out how to technologically solve that problem. That's middle management. The middle management is there to organize the resources and try to solve the problems and to fulfill the vision of the top level. So that's O. Not much of that is happening at the top, and not much of that is really happening down at the line level. And then that's P, O, L, and C, controlling. So after this whole after this whole process is put in motion, after the plans are set, after the resources are organized, and after the workers have started to produce something, we need to control. We need to see and to reflect back on our goals and to see if we're meeting our targets. And that flow of control comes from the bottom. A lot of it comes from the front line. And a lot of that comes from the middle to go to the top, so the top can evaluate the decisions and the strategy that is being taken. So those are the three levels in terms of how they relate to the business functions. POLC, it's an acronym, I'll call it POLC in the future. So you know PEST, you know the 4 Ps, you know POLC. These are all ways to help you remember things. So whenever you hear, for example, external environment, the first thing that should come to your mind is PEST. When you hear marketing, the first thing that should come to mind is 4 Ps. When you hear management, the first thing that comes to mind should be POLC, POLC. Those are the functions of management. Okay, so today I introduced the idea of features of organizational structures here. Chain of command, span of control, and delegation. Those were mostly vocabulary words for you to know about how to think about these things. I will play a short video here as a review. It's 4 minutes.
Meet Nathan. He is the Chief Executive Officer of a large multinational corporation. He manufactures a wide variety of chemicals for both residential and commercial applications. Nathan's company engages in business activities on 5 continents in over 25 countries. The company employs over 50,000 people with a budget that rivals the GDP of some third world countries. Needless to say, running a company of this size requires a high degree of organization and management. This is where hierarchy comes in. Hierarchy is a way to structure an organization using different levels of authority and a vertical link or chain of command.
That's a term that I introduced last video. Chain of command is the links in the organization. It's not the levels, it's the links. Notice that it says vertical link or chain of command. So again, if you're looking at your book on page 88, where we left off, you'll see a 4-level hierarchy. That 4-level hierarchy starts with the board of directors, and it goes down past the HR manager to the personnel manager. Personnel, I don't know what the difference is between the personnel and the human resource manager. They're basically the same. But in this case, this personnel manager, they need to respond or report to the HR manager. That's one link. The HR manager will report to their human resources department head, that's the second link, and then the human resource manager will report to the board of directors, that's the third link. So in other words, the chain of command is how many links between the bottom and the top of the structure, not how many levels. So that would be 3. You can write this down, probably. That's probably important.
Between superior and subordinate levels of the organization. Higher levels control lower levels of the hierarchy. You can think of an organizational hierarchy as a pyramid. The highest level of authority is at the top of the pyramid, and orders flow from this top level down to the next level, where it continues to move on down until it reaches the level where the order is supposed to be carried out.
I use the word delegate responsibility. So the orders, I don't know why they use the word orders, but you're delegating, you're giving or delegating responsibility to those below you in the hierarchy. Hierarchy, that's the #1 form of, classic form of business organizational structure. So most of what I'm talking about today, you will hear it in terms of traditional or tall structures. Those have the same meaning.
Information and directions flow vertically in a hierarchical structure. Information flows up through each level until it reaches the top. After all the information has been received and assessed, a decision will be made at the top and will flow down through the levels of the hierarchy until it reaches the level where the decision will be implemented.
Okay, so those decisions, that was introduced. I'm also introducing this today in terms of centralization and decentralization of decision making. But I don't know, this chart is okay, but I think they're messing with your language a little bit. Decisions are made at the top in a traditional structure, right? Responsibilities and delegation of authority are given down the hierarchy. And here it says information, but I would use the term, I wouldn't use the term information, I would use the term accountability. Accountability means to give an account of what happened at each level and to report that back to the top. So their terminology here, the graphic is okay, but the terminology here is a little bit wanting. Yes, I would use delegate and give responsibility and report back up and show accountability, which is controlling in the POLC.
Also, note that the top level of the hierarchy often coordinates all the activities and communication of the various parts of the organization. Let's look at an example. Nathan has received a report from his Research and Development Division that a new cleaning solvent has successfully passed all regulatory requirements and is ready to be produced and marketed to the public. Nathan sends directions to his Vice President of Finance to prepare a budget for financing the production and marketing of the new chemical. He directs his marketing VP to have a marketing plan developed and his VP of production to develop a production schedule based on the projected budget received from the finance VP. Each VP will delegate part of their task to their respective department heads, who may, in turn, delegate some tasks to their supervisors. Once the task has been completed, the information will flow back up through the hierarchy to Nathan, where it will be assessed and further decisions will be made. An organizational chart is a diagram of an organization's structure. It will show the job titles and patterns of authority in the organization. It is a useful tool to figure out an organization's hierarchy. The top of the chart will depict the highest level of the hierarchy. A line will typically be used to show the superior-subordinate relationship between each level. Let's look at what the organizational chart of Nathan's company may look like. Nathan's level is represented by the term president, with a line flowing down to each vice president under his direct control. Each vice president will have lines flowing down to each department head that each vice president controls. Lines from the department heads will flow down to the supervisors they manage. Supervisors will have a line flowing down to the team of employees each manages. You will be able to trace a path of authority from the bottom of the chart all the way up to Nathan, and will be able to tell who answers to whom. Let's review.
All right, so that's pretty much definitional again. I would perhaps throw one more 2-minute video at you.
Hello there, buddy. With a little help from my animated friends, let's find out what organizational structure means. Now meet Nancy. She's the Chief Executive Officer, or CEO of Awesome Corp, a company with 35 employees. Well, this is Jim. He's the Chief Operating Officer, or COO, of Awesome Corp. He's Nancy's second in command and reports directly to her. Jim oversees a wide variety of areas, including production, sales, and marketing. Mutlu is the Chief Financial Officer, or CFO. Simply put, he's responsible for the financial health of the company. Nancy, Jim, and Mutlu are Awesome Corp's executive team. But Awesome Corp has more employees than just 3. A lot more. Let's take a look at the financial department. And as you remember, Mutlu is the CFO, and this is his team. Layla is the Senior Receivables Accountant. She manages accounts receivables. That's the money coming into the company from its customers. She makes sure invoices get issued and that awesome port gets paid on time. Well, this is Thomas. He's Layla's peer, meaning that they are likely to receive comparable compensation, and they both report to Moody. Thomas's area is slightly different though. Thomas handles accounts payable. That's the money that the company pays to its suppliers and service providers. He also happens to handle the company's taxes. Susan is a procurement specialist. She works with the company's suppliers and partners to make sure the company always has sufficient resources and that service contracts are up to date. She frequently scouts new vendors in order for Awesome Corp to get the best prices. And Thomas is her manager. Ahoy, Financial Department! Of course, there are more departments. Together, all these employees from Awesome Corp, decision-making power flows from the top to the bottom, with a greater concentration at the top. All companies are slightly different, but this will give you a solid start. For practice, try sketching out an organizational structure of your company or college. Good luck.
Company or college? That's us, Saigon International College. And they just gave you your homework. Your homework is to sketch out an organizational structure of Saigon International College. It's too bad you're not here in school, because it would be a lot easier if you could think about it from the position of the organization that you're in, unfortunately. But it's an assignment we usually do every year, so I'd like you to try it. Okay, are we a traditional structure? That's a good question. I'll probably let you think about it for a few videos for this week, but you'll need to turn it in next week. All right, so to go back to what I was, I feel like now you should have a pretty good idea of what the chain of command is from the pictures and the structure here. For example, the chain of command between the top and the bottom of this organization is 1 link, 2 links, 3 links. Again, the chain of command would be 3 if you had it on a quiz. The span of control for example, the sales department would only be 2 people. These 2 people report directly to that lady. For Jim here, the operating officer, his span of control would be 3 people. 3, you would say number 3 to go to Jim. It's not 7, it's not everybody. These people don't report to Jim. These people report to their departments who report to Jim. So the span of control is just how many people directly report to you, not everybody under you. So I feel like that's fairly clear. I'm on page 89 at the bottom of the, I'm in the 4th paragraph where it says traditional organizational charts. Traditional organizational charts are based on showing the hierarchy of an organization. This illustrates responsibilities and lines of communication. Each person in an organization is usually given a particular amount of authority, which is the formal power associated with the position that they hold. Formal power, that means by the name of your position, the job. I am the whatever, head teacher, for example. I have a certain weird authority. Formally, authority is not usually related to who the individual is. That power is given to the connected where the place is held in the organizational chart. The person is also given a certain level of accountability, which means, that's the word I like, which means that they're responsible for specific tasks, but not only to do them, but to report that they have been completed or how they've been completed. So that's traditional, right? There's many levels. There's not a lot of room for feedback. That's the information flow that goes back up the hierarchy. If you have a big structure, usually people at the lower end of the structure cannot really communicate well with the top of the structure. I'll finish this page. Modern business structures tend to rely on delegation to achieve business goals. Delegation means to give authority. When a manager or supervisor is able to assign authority to an employee or becomes responsible for decision making. Again, I'm going to talk about hierarchical, traditional, tall structures first. And those structures don't have a lot of authority or power being delegated to the staff below. Other structures do, but for the traditional structure, very little. So that's why it says modern business structures. They're able to assign authority to an employee who becomes responsible for decision making. The accountability for the work still remains with the manager who delegated. However, decision-making authority has been shifted to a different level of the organizational chart. Successful delegation grows the skills and the competencies of staff members. So there's different goals in different organizations about how you improve employees. Okay, so the entire page 90 and 91. Let's not confuse ourselves. These are all different forms of what I'm calling traditional structures. So this in our book is a little bit, is not well done. It's really not well done. These two, I'm going to have to explain these. This is poorly done, poorly done. Okay, so the first three things on this chart are different kinds of traditional structures. The last thing on this chart is not a structure at all. And if I had a zoom up here, I would type on it and erase it and delete it and blot it out. And I would put the word flat. And still, that should be a separate bullet point. That should be a completely different bullet point. This one does not exist in this same category of the first three. So it's very upsetting to me. Now, if I was going to talk about the different kinds of, so if I was going to revise this, it would say types of traditional organizational structures, and then this one would be out, and then those three would be three of them, and if you look on page 90 and 91 in your book, you would see that there are four of them, not three. So this is really, I don't know why they don't update this. I really don't understand. We deserve better. We deserve better. Okay, so first I'm going to go through the traditional style of, these are all traditional forms. Page 90, I got to get through these four things today. And then we're going to go through the matrix in the next class. It's really sad the way they do this. Anyway, individual managers and employees together make up a business organization. It is the employees, be they supervisors, middle, or frontline employees, who make sure that the objectives and goals of the business are met, and then they have to report them. They're accountable. It is important to structure the business in the best way for this to happen. Business structures can be shown in a summary diagram called an organizational chart. At the simplest level, this shows the responsibilities and lines of communication within the organization. A traditional organizational chart, they're usually in the form of some kind of pyramid with one person followed by more people. Thus, each of the types of each of the four types of charts on the following pages would have teams of employees working in each part of the organization reporting to the managers above. These are called traditional hierarchical style of organizational structure, or tall structures. These features of these structures have several layers of management. Usually you would have to, if you wanted to make a number, you'd have to say at least 3, but probably up to 12. Flatter structures have up to 3. So that's why they're tall or flat. A lot of information directed downwards. The more levels you have, the communication is much more direct in terms of the direction, the downward direction, and the information given. There's less feedback from the bottom to the top. A lot of information directed downwards to the employees at the lower levels. Decision making can be regarded as centralized or decentralized. In a tall or traditional hierarchical style, the major decisions are being made at the top levels. Sometimes it's called top-down management. That's the decision making. You can imagine Hitler, okay? This is one person who makes all the decisions. A clear chain of command and a span of control. So we have everybody knows where they stand in the hierarchy. Plus, there's a lot of movement. Let me add one more thing. Because there are many levels, the employees can be quite competitive because they believe that they're going to be able to move up and down the structure. So when we get to motivating employees in a traditional structure, one of the motivations is a promotion. We're giving an example here, a large manufacturing organization. Remember, tall structures function best in mass market situations. A large manufacturing organization might have many management levels, from line managers on the manufacturing floor to their superiors in geographically located factories, to the state or national level management. Due to their size, there would be there's going to be many policy and procedure manuals. Everything is written down, everything is very formal in terms of its communication. The employees are not given much choice in how they do things. Which employees are expected to be knowledgeable about what and what to follow. This organization would also have most decisions being made at top level state. This is called a hierarchical structure. It's clear about reporting. So, those are the features of the structure. When we look at these two pages on 90 and 91, I did mention before that a hierarchical structure must have 3 and probably at least 4 levels. But when we look at these pages, we don't see 4 levels. What we're looking at on these pages is only the top levels and the way that the company is organized. If this were real, there would be at least 4 or 5, 6 levels below these levels here. So this is just the top of the hierarchical structure. These are all really tall structures. Okay, so when we look at this, some of them might be very familiar to you. You might have, easy to imagine when you're in school here. You see that there's a finance department, there's an academic department, there's a marketing department, there's a sales department, and then after that, I don't know if we have other departments. So yeah, you wouldn't put, the maintenance department on the same level as the academic department. They're probably going to be under another department, right? Like the vice principal or the principal. And then you have Mr. Bryan, who's the head of making sure that the academic department works, and the Australian management going into the hierarchy. And then we have the Board of Education of Ho Chi Minh City, and they're coming down into the principal, and not only the academics, but all the other elements of marketing and administration. So we have kind of a double system. We have 2 different systems happening at the same time. We have the educational and administrative systems. The things that I just mentioned about accounting and marketing, those are called functions of the business. Sometimes they're called departments. Again, there's too many words in business English that are repeated or slightly similar. So the functional structure here, remember there are many levels, not just two. The functional structure, the business organization is grouped into areas according to what is done, and in the areas of what is done in that area of the business. So similar tasks are grouped together. And this is useful when specific similar products or services are being made. Why? In this type of structure, every person or unit becomes very good. We use the word specialization. Their tasks specialized. Employees usually have clear career pathways because hierarchies have movement and a chance to develop to higher levels of skill and possible promotions. In contrast, some employees may find this structure very inflexible and not very creative. And that is true. We're not asking KFC to reinvent chicken at this point. They're just trying to mass produce as many restaurants as possible. Maybe in the marketing department, they need a little bit of creativity, but for the operations, it's mostly just do the job. So that's what they mean by rigid or inflexible. It doesn't satisfy some employees' needs to be creative. And there could be a temptation for managers to become centered in one area of the business to focus on other areas. So we'll look at that a little bit. There's some downsides, I guess, but the downside depends on the goal. If the goal is to mass produce, then quality control is number one. If the goal is to create innovative products, then this structure is relatively ineffective. If those goals need groups of people to interact with one another and not be competitive, which is what happens in a divisional or functional structure, there's often competition for resources and promotions between the groups, salary increases. So there is some intra-company competition sometimes in a functional structure. So you can see here, we can add research and development, marketing, personnel, which is human resources, the finance department, operations. So these would all be different functions, and each department would have many people working in them. And the idea is that you group people according to their expertise, so they get very good in their specialization. So that's a functional structure. Most of us are very familiar with that. So then we have a few other kinds of structures. I would jump to number 3 on page 91 because that's probably the easiest to understand. Divisional or geographic structure just is tailored to the differences in the region of, let's say you would have in Vietnam maybe 3 main regions, Minh, Minh Bắc, Minh Trung, Minh Nam. And you might have those 3 regions that have some special needs or special kinds of distribution systems, and you would want to have somebody who's closer to the operation in each geographical area. So each section of the organization functions as a self-contained unit. It's a geographic structure. And they might either have functional or, well, probably functional structures where they have their own departments in each group. Now this is for big companies, they're big regions. The central office of the organization usually provides human resources and financial services at a central location. This should allow each division to respond more appropriately to local needs and requirements. It should also assist with lessening competition between areas of the business, so staff can focus on their area and not worry about other areas, although it could be competitive as well. It's sort of, you know, in international business, it's very common. You might have a director for Southeast Asia, and then you'd have each individual country would have their own manager for Vietnam and Thailand, for example. So that's a geographic structure. Product structure, number 2. Why would you choose this kind of structure? I think their example is well taken. Here, in a supermarket, you're trying to bring together a broad variety of foods, and whether, shampoos or whatever, whatever materials that you're trying to, kitchen materials and cooking oils. Many of these different kinds of products have different systems of ordering, distribution, wholesaling, production. They have different, they need to be transported in specific ways, let's say dairy products or ice cream. So I don't need to have everybody in the business have every kind of knowledge about how all of these different supply chains work. This is about getting the products together, different kinds of products, into one supermarket. So I want people who are good at one thing here to deal with one kind of product or distributor or wholesaler or even producer if you have fair trade. So the organization is grouped into areas according to the individual products being sold. So if you were going to have all of them go to the same customer, I guess that's the point. So in a product structure, you're all selling to the same customer, but you're selling under different supply chains. This structure allows the organization to make decisions relatively quickly and to locate all personnel related to each area together. So if I had to pull different people from different departments to figure out what was going on and why we don't have any eggs, it would be harder than just going to the egg department and figuring out why there's no eggs. So it's actually about, it's really about supply chains, and it's about making sure that inventory is good at all times. A supermarket needs to have a consistent inventory. So this personnel can be located and related to each area together. It may have advantages related to the spreading of overhead costs over disadvantages. Okay, so you might have some people who do similar jobs, some duplication in departments. Other places where this could work are like, let's say, Aebme L, or Winkin maybe, or any of Chalon, Aebme Chalon, where some people, it would benefit for them to be specialists in refrigerators, some people to be specialists in telephones, some people televisions, air conditioners, whatever. So we can see from this chart, this is only the top two levels. There are many levels. That in this supermarket example, they have fruits and vegetables, very different from trying to deal with baked goods in the bakery, right? The bakery is going to make food every day. Maybe they're going to make it fresh. The fruit and vegetable department has got to go and deal with completely different distributors. They've got to worry about the freshness of the fruit and vegetables, how long they're going to last. This is also true for the meat department. But then we have other groups like toiletries and shampoos and all those things which last forever, and they're usually bought from big companies like Unilever. They have big international, multinational sources. Those companies don't need to be involved with the fruit and vegetable people. And they give you some other examples like dairy products, frozen foods. So that's a product structure. I think that the supermarket is a good example of that. Each one has some disadvantages. Most of the disadvantages of hierarchical structures are too many managers. There's many levels in the middle, and some of these managers may do similar jobs, or maybe some of their work is duplicated, meaning that they do the same thing. So there are some, obviously, inefficiencies, but the price of that, or the reason why we have that is because either With a functional structure, we want expertise in each division, with each function. In a geographic structure, we want to have specialization for marketing, for example. For each area, they have specific needs. Maybe in Hanoi, they think that the food is too sweet. In Saigon, they have a different kind of, they want different kinds of foods or whatever, or different flavors. But in a product structure, we're really concerned about making sure we manage inventory and supply chains, and each one of them tends to be slightly different from the others. Okay, then we get to number 4, which is the customer structure. Which is not on our list. It should be. Customer structure, look at the example. Remember, again, this is just the top levels of a longer and taller hierarchy. So, it starts with the CEO, and then it says household customers, small business customers, and then educational institution customers. So the customer structure, think about that picture. Look at it for a second, and I'm going to ask you, what kind of company could that be? What do you imagine it might be? Customer structure. Each section of the organization is focused on providing for the needs of a specific group of customers. So it's not focused on supply chains and inventory. It's not focused necessarily on the geographical differences in an area, but it's focused on the kinds of customers, a specific group. This means that the needs of individuals and the service to those customers is more likely to be met. And the organization can group customers on the basis of the value that they provide the business. Again, unfortunately, it may result in spreading overhead costs over a larger area. Overhead means fixed costs, and that means salaries of duplicate workers, again. Work duplication and conflict over allocating resources. Fighting within the business over resources instead of working together to achieve goals. I don't know if you want them to work together. You would expect everyone to understand, maybe there's some battle, but I would think not so much. In the example that I'm thinking of here, did you guess? Anybody guess what this might be? Household customers, small business customers, educational, institutional customers. I think the third one kind of gives it away. I think just throw away the household customers, just like individuals. Guess? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, publishing company. That's what that would be, like a book publisher. So if you were going to have a customer structure for this book publisher, you might have a system for individual buyers, like Amazon, some kind of online catalog or online purchasing system. Amazon started as a online bookseller. So you want to have a whole department that's going to focus on updating and facilitating sales for individual customers. Then you have the bookstores. Those are the small business customers. And those bookstores are going to want to buy not individual books, they're going to buy big groups of books, and they're going to be looking for trends, bestsellers, what's hot, the new. There's going to be some inventory to follow, but they're not going to have every book in stock. Individual customers might be looking for very specific books, and they might need specific expertise. The small bookshops may also need for themselves to be able to know that, but the way that you sell to the bookstore is to sell bulk books and what's hot. Now, you can sell to them differently, maybe not like Amazon, but you would maybe you want them to know what's going on and what's hot. You want to update them right away. So maybe you have a catalog that you send out that they get, every week or every 2 weeks about what's happening, what's new, what's going to come out, new releases that are going to come out soon. And so they can prepare and order in advance. You can make advance orders. So you have a whole different kind of selling team that's going to be involved with your retail businesses customers. So in this way, the company would have retail operations direct to customers, and then wholesale operations to bookstores. And then you would have a third group, educational institutional customers like Saigon International College. So for us, you are not going to use probably a website to sell to us. You're not going to send us a catalog. We're not looking for what's necessarily hot. We're looking for consistency, we're looking for a relationship, we're looking for discounts that come from loyalty, and we want to have an individual agent or seller who comes to us from your company, a sales representative that we can contact whenever we have a problem or an issue. So that kind of selling is direct selling. We want to, we're going to be big customers, we're going to be customers that buy every year, and we're easy to manage. It's mostly about customer management. It's not about what's hot, and it's not about serving individual customers. So for a book publisher, perhaps a customer structure would be best, because you have 3 different ways of selling: retail, wholesale, direct selling. So that would mean that a customer structure would be the best choice. So there you can see 4 different kinds of functional. These are all, well, functional in this case is the first structure of departments. Product structure is what depends on supply chains. Divisional is geographic in terms of this example. And then the customer structure should be there based on how we sell to the customers and the kind of relationship and expectations that that customer has. This will come later, and it's different. These are all short, these are just the top levels of management. On the next page, it has something called expanded organizational chart. This is just what I said before. Organizational charts can contain a lot of detail if you're doing a full organization. It is possible to show the position of every employee in the organization. A functional structure can be expanded to show more detail about one of the areas. For example, below, we find ourselves looking at the marketing division. So these are expanded organizational charts where everyone can see everyone. As I said before, it says this organization would be said to have a chain of command of 4 layers in its hierarchy. So you can see from the board of directors to the CEO is 1, the CEO to the marketing manager is 2, the marketing manager to the PR supervisor is 3, and the PR supervisor to the staff is 4. And that would be probably a real minimum level. Anything smaller than that would probably be a flat structure. This is the smallest kind of tall structure that you would have. And what else? Should we go for it? Maybe. Probably not. Let me see. I think I should start with decentralization in the next video. But I will introduce it. So, what the limits are of tall traditional structures tend to be creativity. So they function very well for mass production. That's why they're called traditional in traditional, times. And also it's very Western-centric in the sense that, we still have very tall organizational structures in Vietnam and other countries where manufacturing happens more. But in Western companies, there's been an innovation revolution, mostly because of the internet, of course, and the competition between companies for innovation is very strong. So because of this, many of these traditional structures have changed or tried to adapt to the needs of the innovative culture, meaning that they're starting to take away some of the levels of management and trying to create a system where companies they have more flexibility, is the word I'm going to use. In order to do this, they sometimes, they're trying to get groups of people together who give more feedback, who can work together, and also give more power to those employees. Now, in a